Hey, Squiddy, listen and listen very close. We got a very special guest today. My man Mike G is in the building. He works with Jrue Holiday. He's worked with Anthony Davis, works with a lot of high-level NBA players. We went into detail on their training programs. We then talk about weird ways to build athleticism. We talk about our shared love for barefoot training, trampoline training, training in the pool, the pros and cons of training in the sand. We talk about recovery. We talk about how much lifting do we need. We talk about bilateral versus unilateral strength training. We went over a lot of different topics. You're going to want to watch the entire episode. Do not skip a minute. Do not skip a second. Let's get this work.
You're listening to the PJF Podcast, a show dedicated to decoding elite sports performance and fitness. I'm Paul Favorites, and I'm an NBA strength and conditioning and performance trainer. If you want to become superhuman, take your fitness, and take your sports performance to the next level, this is the podcast for you. Let's do it.
All right, guys, we got my guy Mike G in the building. So high-level strength coach, works with guys like Jrue Holiday, a lot of NBA players he's worked with. So, hey, I appreciate you being here, my man.
Listen, the pleasure is all mine.
I think a lot of people in the industry have been watching your stuff because you're very creative, science-based, really good stuff. I've been watching you for, probably 5 to 7 years now. So, followed you a long time ago, and I always just appreciated the level of detail in your work. And your resume speaks for itself. The guys that you work with get results. So kind of define your role kind of within the industry. Some people work for a team. Some people work, like me, directly for the players. Are you hired by the players or by the team?
I am essentially you. I do not work with the teams as much. I have been in the past. Two seasons ago was my first year with the Pelicans, and it was more of like a consulting role. As you know, there was new management put in place, and that kind of put me in a position to be independent once again. But for the most part, I am dedicated to one particular player, as everybody knows. His name is Jrue Holiday, shooting guard for the Pelicans. And essentially, I just travel. I'm his little Asian shadow.
Yeah, there you go.
I go from state to state with him. I even travel with him during the season on road trips as well. And during the off season or COVID, we moved back to Los Angeles because he is from the Chatsworth area and he has a home in the Thousand Oaks area. So It's essentially me just being there for Jrue whenever he needs me, and anything else on top of that is just kind of icing on the cake, so to speak. So whenever he's blessed me with the opportunity to train other players with him at his house, and that's kind of what you see on social media during the summertime in the off season.
Right. Awesome. Yeah, Jrue Holiday. So it's funny because I talk about him daily because I got a point guard right now, high school point guard, who has a similar frame, and he's kind of our North Star of where I want him to get physically. I've always looked at Jrue Holiday as being the typical big guard. Like, I can bully you, but he can move still. Very quick, good agility, very strong. He's very basketball strong, meaning when he hits people, they move. When he gets hit, he does not move. Is he also weight room strong as well?
He is one of the strongest in the weight room that I have trained, and that's including NFL, because I've worked with NFL Combine as well. We put a huge emphasis in the weight room because of his style of play. Yeah. And as everybody knows, as you know, he does not shy away from fives all the way down to one. He'll guard 1 through 5 in the post. And we obviously know that the weight room can contribute to the success of guarding bigs in the post.
Right.
And, you look on social media all over the place, they have clips of him defending LeBron, defending AD, defending Kevin Love in the post and winning.
Right.
So obviously I would do him a disservice if I did not give him the necessary strength weight room wise to be able to stand big guys up that are taller, that are heavier, and that have better leverage. So yes, the answer is yes. He is very strong in the weight room.
Yeah. Yeah, and he can really move too. The series that people have to go study is the one against Damian Lillard. Man, and Damian Lillard was cooking. He was hot, and Jrue came in and just shut him down. Defensively, Jrue is like the guy that you want to study if you're a point guard. How much like agility focus do you put into play? And how much is he kind of just like naturally super quick? He kind of has like some sneaky athleticism, some sneaky bounce. So how much do you sort of do the agility and the plyometrics and trying to build athleticism versus just trying to build that strength?
I think most of us performance guys, look at the offseason in terms of phases, right? Like we try to periodize. We are blessed. We're working with guys in the NBA that, sometimes if you don't go to the playoffs, you got 3 to 4 months to create something special within those phases. And we put a huge emphasis early on in the weight room to kind of create that foundational strength and base, if you will, to build athleticism on top of. But I want to really make a point that his defensive prowess isn't necessarily due to training. I think we do have a small contribution from training, but his anticipation and knowledge and education of who is in front of him, I think is what separates his ability to shut people down on ball.
Right.
Because we talk about it all the time. Like, how do you know to cut people off, to run people's routes for them, if you will, if it's a football analogy.
Right.
Literally jumping in front of somebody, taking on contact, and then that little left hand poke out and give me the ball type situation. And I'm like, how? Like, that's not, you're there before he's even there. So the speed and agility aspect of it is kind of not really the component, it's the anticipation.
Right.
And he's just like, I just know these guys.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, he does. And that is a trait of the greatest defenders, is they just see things a step ahead. It's like they're watching the game in slow motion while everybody else is watching it in real speed.
That part.
But I think that the agility to get there, the speed to get there when he wants to get there, and the strength to stand up bigger guys, I think that is definitely secondary, but that is very instrumental in his defensive abilities.
Right.
How about, so you worked, was it last offseason, a lot with AD?
Correct.
What was it like working with AD? Because I see him as just like this oversized deer. It's like, how does he move that well at that size?
Yeah, it was actually relatively a not very difficult problem to solve from a performance standpoint. You got a guy that's freakishly athletic, and that's not something that you need to superbly focus on because he got it. Like, it's there already. So now it's like, all right, what are the issues with the athlete? What do we need to improve? That's low-hanging fruit. That's the big rocks, if you will, that will dramatically have a promotion in his level of play. And for me, it's all about degrees of freedom, range of motion, if you will, and then how strong are you at A, controlling those degrees of freedom, and then B, can you live and play in all those degrees of freedom? So when you look at an athlete like that, he plays with his hands above his head a lot, obviously protecting the rim. Can his shoulders sustain high loads and forces in the most vulnerable position?
Yep.
Look at his lower body. Generally, taller people don't like to be low. And that's tennis, that's football, that's basketball. They just don't like to be low. Why? Because it's uncomfortable. It costs energy. So can I give him the ability to live low and be comfortable there? And for me, that was really all that I felt like I needed to approach to be successful, and for him to be to feel better, to feel like he's more athletic, to feel like it was worth putting in dog days in Santa Rosa Valley with Jrue Holiday. Right. And it worked. Like, he embraced the culture that I bring to the table. He understood and believed and trusted where I wanted to go with him, because everything's about communication. And it was very important for me to help him understand and know where I was going with it. And it's just like, at the end of the day, holding a 20 to 30 second rear foot elevated split squat at the bottom end range with 185 pounds on your back, it's not going to feel good.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, it's going to suck.
Right.
Are you cool with that?
Right.
And he made that decision. And, luckily, he was able to sustain that for 3 months. We did very well, and he had a really pretty promising season until obviously the abruption of the world pandemic. So
right. That's awesome. You're talking about range, getting guys comfortable in those low positions. Mm-hmm. How much do you still involve static stretching versus maybe your traditional mobility unloaded drills where you're just getting them through a full range versus your actual loaded, like we're just training and getting stronger, that happens to be through full range of motion?
I think it's dependent on who you're working with. For instance, if you have an athlete that's pretty locked up and doesn't really have a whole lot of freedom, passive stretching does have some benefit there. I'm a big proponent and fan of FRC, functional range conditioning. I've taken many of their courses because the stuff works. And the more and more I spend time passively, the more and more I understand that I need to reconnect the brain to that new range that we've opened up from the passive stretch. So we'll spend time in a passive range if they need that range in a hip, in an ankle. Obviously, dorsiflexion sucks in 80% of basketball players. Big toe extension, we'll spend time. But then we always gas it. I coined the term gas because it's like applying force into that range of motion. So I say, let's gas our stretch now. So we'll hang out passively for a minute and then we'll gas it to reintroduce neural connection within that new range of motion that we just created passively. Not everyone needs to be passive because they already own that range of motion passively, but they just don't have the strength to maintain that passive range with a little bit of force. And that's when injuries happen. When you have good range of motion, but you can't control that range of motion or own that range of motion actively, now your brain kind of doesn't understand those forces and then things happen. Tissue doesn't really react well to those environments. So let's say, all right, I have an athlete that has great mobility passively, but can you own those ranges? Can we introduce forces in those ranges? So it's very dependent on, athlete specific on what we do with those strategies. But obviously I think everyone can afford all those phases, whether it's passive stretching, gassing the stretch, and then obviously loading those stretched end ranges of motion as well. So
yeah, absolutely. As far as loading guys, when we're talking about let's get strong, let's move a little bit of weight. For lower body, do you prefer more unilateral stuff or bilateral stuff? Do you use any like heavy back squats? What are your thoughts there?
Traditionally, no back squatting with longer lever dudes because they just aren't very good at it. I think that there is some credence to heavy bilateral back squats if you have athletes that do it well from a hormonal standpoint, from a tissue tolerance standpoint. I think there's a lot of bang for buck there. But the reality is I don't have guys that can back squat well. Yet. I'm not saying that I won't ever. Hopefully one day I will. I mean, I'm not for the back squat. I'm not against it. But if I want to create some testosterone and some HGH, and loading a heavy bilateral back squat is something that I have access to, I'll do that for sure because it's an easy way to get those endocrine responses. But as it applies to my current athletes, we go with the unilateral stuff. We were just talking about, I don't even know what it's called, but it's basically a hex bar with a back part
without
missing.
The back,
what do they call that?
I've heard it called a U-bar.
U-bar, that's what I say. Yeah. U-bar.
That's
perfect.
It's a U-bar.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So we use the U-bar, and it's easy. It's a tool that allows you to easily overload the eccentric phase of the rear foot elevated split squat. And that is definitely a method that I love for your tissue tolerance, your hormonal responses. And then if an athlete lacks good breaks, it's a great way to apply super maximal loads to an eccentric phase.
For sure.
2 up, 1 down.
Right.
Stand up with 2 legs, lower that thing down with 1, and
Right.
it's super effective.
Yeah, it's also, you can manipulate it in so many ways. I can move the foot back and get it a little more quad loading, knee loading. I can move the leg forward and increase the torso lean and get more glutes, adductor, hamstring.
Yep.
So yeah, you can really kind of mess with that. And guys, I'm sure you've worked with guys who have knee problems. Every basketball player basically has them. It's just, where are they at? Is it bothering them or not bothering them? And so we can kind of start with the foot a little bit further and get more glute dominant and then gradually start to move it back. Whereas a back squat, there's only so much that we can do, making it knee versus hip dominant.
Yep.
How about for like trap bar deadlifts? Do you do any type of heavy deadlifting?
I like, and you talk about this a lot. Shout out to Edge U. If y'all don't know about it, you need to know about it.
There's the plug right there.
They are cutting edge, and I really, really appreciate them.
I appreciate that.
You guys talk about Olympic lift variations often, and I, in my opinion, I feel like that is exactly the best alternative to Olympic lifting, if not better, just based off of where the bar is and the center of mass is over the load. Just makes more sense, especially to hoopers.
Right.
And we do that exactly. You know, we'll put guys on the force plates and do jumps with the trap bar to get that strength speed aspect of training in that particular phase, and it's safe, and the learning curve is literally 2 seconds.
Right.
And I don't have time to be teaching guys hang cleans and power cleans and snatches, because truthfully, if time is of the essence, and a lot of times it is with these NBA guys, these high level guys, why not just go straight to the point? Step into a trap bar and jump with that thing.
Right.
You know what I mean?
By their second set, they're getting max intent because there's no complexity that's messing with that max intent.
So,
And that's the thing, is like, there's some coaches that would argue with that and be like, Olympic lifting is not that hard to teach. I agree, it's not that hard to teach. It's hard for them to master it at a level where they can step in and get max intent without thinking about the form. And so you spend months, if not years, in that phase where it's like, I'm still consciously thinking about getting under that bar. And because of that, you're kind of ruining the fluidity of the movement and taking away that max intent. And then the other thing is, you know, Olympic lifting, I'm not necessarily against it, but for basketball players I am, because it beats up your body a little bit. You come away with sort of sore thighs from brushing it. You come away with some sore wrists. I understand that, hey, we got to get the elbows up and we're not catching with the wrist, but you're going to miss lifts. Even the best, you know, they don't quite get under it and it comes down loaded bar on the wrist, and then they go in and they're missing shots because we made their wrist sore. We can't afford to do that. As strength coaches, like, we're trying to assist what they're doing on the court. So rule number 1 is like, I got to get you healthier, and I do not want to bang you up in the weight room. So yeah, I agree. Olympic lift variations, high pulls, that kind of stuff, trap bar jumps, anything. And I'm sure you've seen on the force plate, like, you can get some serious force output, power output very, very quick. Yeah. Are there any actual Olympic lifts that you still do? Do you do any type of like snatching or? Yeah,
I do actually. And it's all unilateral. So we'll grab a heavy fat bell.
Yeah.
And the reason, and I'll predominantly program that in like the warm up phase to just, let's get some brain stuff going. You know what I mean? Let's create some whole body force output, not for maximal force intent or anything like that, but let's just get the mind going, because at the end of the day, I champion coordination over a lot of these physical attributes, which isn't even a physical attribute, but I champion coordination of what we have an influence over as athletes, because I feel like coordination is going to transfer to the court the most. So yes, we do lift heavy, and there is a moment to do that type of stuff, but that's mainly for tissue tolerance. I'm just trying to condition the tissue so that they are able to withstand high amounts of forces in the connective tissue. And that does generally take high loads. But at the end of the day, if we can create coordination aspects from lifting into the way we move on the court or in any sport that we're training for, there is the bridging effect.
Right.
So just to get back to the question, being able to snatch a little bit on the single side of things with a heavy fat bell or with a heavy dumbbell. I try to stay away from kettlebells because, again, that ball
flips
creeping over. Doesn't feel too good. And again, we don't want to hurt the ratchet. So
can't mess with that.
Again, teaching energy transfer.
Yeah.
Right. Can you pull this heavy mass over your head, but traveling from the floor into overhead,
right,
and then stabilizing with that shoulder obviously does help with shoulder stability in the overhead position. So
that was one of the questions that we got. I posted to my story, what questions do you have for Mike? And a couple of the questions were talking about the fat bells, because I've seen you using those. I actually just got some of those last year, and I've been messing around with those. What do you feel like the benefits are of those versus like your typical kettlebell or dumbbell?
It's a great question. And I think the variety, and they have so many different ways to think about how you want to load the hands. So you can hold the fat bell as if it's like a basketball. So now you're working not only whatever movement that you're working, but like the grip strength, the forearm strength, things that people would never even think about. If I am consistently holding something by handles with a relatively comfortable diameter, it's different from holding something with a circumference. So anytime I'll do like multi-directional lunges or, some type of Euro action, you're creating a different stimulus to the brain because now your tactile feedback is a little different.
Right.
So I really like the ability for basketball players to hold circumference while they move around with this mass.
Right.
Now, obviously the mass isn't super heavy because you don't want to, drop the fat bell on the floor or whatever, but it is a different type of stimulus just texture wise.
I agree.
Also, whenever, I don't know if you've tried it yet, but try bench pressing heavy with center mass bells or fat bells versus regular dumbbells. It's a whole nother experience.
Yeah.
The mass around your hand is equal. So hopefully I can explain this correctly or well enough for people to understand. When you hold a dumbbell, one side, your thumb side and your pinky side are loaded predominantly, and it feels, it feels more horizontal, I guess, in your palm, if you can follow me. But when you have a fat bell in your hand, the load is like 360 degrees versus 180 degrees around your hand.
Right.
So when you're pressing or rowing or any type of upper body movement, it's a different load at the axis of rotation.
Right.
It feels more challenging because now the stability component is, I feel, more difficult. Your brain has to learn how to stabilize something that's 360 degrees around your fist versus just 180 degrees across. I don't know if people are following me with that, but that's kind of how it feels to me.
Anybody who's tried it out would understand what you're saying. You kind of have to feel it out.
Right. So when we're doing overhead stuff, it feels a little more unstable than a dumbbell. And I love overhead carries for basketball players because, again, we're just trying to train degrees of freedom. And what's the weakest range of the shoulder? Obviously, it's at the end range, overhead. And that's generally where people get hurt.
Yep.
So why not do carries with the center mass bell above head, working whatever locomotion pattern that you're working. That's predominantly why we do center mass bells versus dumbbell.
Yeah, and I feel like in a lot of exercises you can get some better range of motion. Like you said with the dumbbell bench press, like if you're repping out some weight and you got 75, 80s, sometimes the head of that is hitting you.
Correct.
Now you can actually miss your chest on the way down because it's closer to your hand. So there's definitely some benefits there. I also feel more comfortable getting on the move and doing stuff. Like I just feel like the dumbbells are clunky.
Yep.
Kettlebells can be clunky when you're really like out there moving, like what you're talking about, drills where you're trying to go light load and Euro steps and that kind of stuff. I like the center of mass bells a lot for that.
If I could add one more thing too, like we'll grab the lowest denomination of center mass bell or fat bell, which is like 8 pounds on each hand. And we'll do all of our multi-directional, like if you follow Thomas Myers, the fascial lines and stuff like that. We'll do all our fascial line stretching with load, and dumbbells just don't feel good doing that. But with the center mass bell, they feel like just an extension of your hand. So
just like a heavy hand.
Heavy hand, like Mega Man. So
right.
Yeah.
So we share a love for trampolines. Not many people share this love. I just put the trampoline in the ground, and my guys have been on that, and they're loving it. Talk a little bit about why you love trampoline work with your guys.
The main reason is why I had an ear-to-ear smile when you mentioned that next subject of conversation is it's fun.
Yeah.
And training needs to be fun, especially when you're dealing with athletes that come from a culture that don't train. They play and play and play. Ever since they're small, pick up a basketball at 6 years old, all they do is play. Most high school programs don't have strength and conditioning for their basketball. They get to college, they're one and done. So what is their training age at the by the time we get them?
True.
So now we're in the psychological aspect of how do we get guys to comply and buy in? Easy way to do that, make training fun. So I love introducing the play aspect to training because it immediately gets people involved mentally. It creates motivation, it creates laughter, it creates competitiveness. So the trampoline is an easy way to do that. I don't know anyone that can jump on a trampoline and start rebounding for a little bit and don't start smiling.
Right.
You know what I mean?
100%.
And that's number one. But obviously, they're, any good performance coach or trainer can think of a slew of reasons why the trampoline training would be good for most athletes. I think another one is physiologically, the lymphatic drainage. It has been documented and quoted many times that it is one of the most effective ways to create lymph circulation. Movement and bouncing essentially are the best ways. There's no pump for that. So jumping rope is cool, but it's just not as fun as trampoline.
Right.
Low impact. You can do all types of muscular driven drills with high neural output, doing high knees as fast as you can, zero impact.
Right.
So, the bang for buck in terms of metabolic conditioning, high neural, contract, relax, contract, those types of things really, really can be manipulated well on the trampoline.
Right.
And then I really like doing high eccentric loading from the trampoline aspect of it because it's fun as well as effective. For instance, guys, picture me on the floor, the trampoline's in front of me. These are mini trampolines. And I jump from the floor to the trampoline, rebound off the trampoline, and land back on the floor. And it's just, you can do altitude jumps where you are on a high box and then jump off and stick the landing. Same thing, but it's just not as fun. It's very engaging to jump, and then stick that landing.
It is. And there's a self-organization aspect to it and a self-selection of jump height off the trampoline. If I tell you, hey, you're going to drop off this 36-inch box, there's no self-selection process, but your guys intuitively know what they can handle eccentrically. So they're not going to jump off the trampoline 60 inches and then land on one leg. They know what they can handle. And so they can kind of self-select and push the jump height or the drop height on that. There's some serious eccentric qualities that I think we can build on the trampoline itself as well. If you've ever been double bounce, this is the best way to describe it. If you've ever been jumping and somebody goes to double bounce you, it doesn't matter how much force you produce. It's not about producing force. It's can I stay stiff? That's it. As long as I can stay stiff, because if I don't stay stiff, you have that collapse of the knees. Everybody's felt that before. And there's a lot of qualities that, that shares with like single leg jumping where I'm bringing in all this speed and I'm going to take off. It's less about what I produce and more about how do I stay stiff eccentrically and isometrically to handle all of these forces to then transition vertically. So like a lot of stuff like single leg jumping, it's just how do I transition, horizontally to vertically. And I feel like if I'm doing single leg, like rapid jumps on a trampoline, I'm getting a lot of that where it's really challenging that stiffness through the knee and even through the ankle if you cue heel off the trampoline.
Yeah. So to add to that point, that sparks a really common application I use with the trampoline is if you guys have ever been to a trampoline park and spent, an hour jumping, the next day, generally for me, my abs are sore.
True.
And the reason why that is because I'm consistently, throughout that entire hour of jumping, trying to maintain a rigid spine to maintain good elasticity and be able to jump high, right? So I took that same application and applied it by just front loading with, have the guys on the trampoline and front loading with a heavy Dynamex ball. We've even done 16 kilogram kettlebells where they're trying to maintain that rigid spine as well as rebound. And again, it's the same idea and application. Can your core assist in that spine being upright and rigid?
Yep.
With that load,
exactly.
You know, trying to pull you down along with the recoil of the springs. And I felt like that really kind of paints the same picture of what you just said in terms of being double jumped and be able to stay stiff.
Right. Can I stay stiff? Yeah. And then there's some other stuff. You have more time in the air, and so you can challenge coordination. You can do stuff with a ball in the air, light medicine ball through the legs, like just different little things that you don't have enough air time on the ground to really work on those qualities. Yeah, so there's a lot there. We also share love for barefoot stuff, foot training in general. I know you've always been real big on that. What are some things that, as far as barefoot training, I should say, what are some areas that you're going to do everything barefoot? Are you going to do your strength training, or is it going to be plyos? Is it going to be agility, or is it just like certain drills? Is it just the warm up? Where you stand on that?
For those who may be watching, we both share these minimalist shoes. Great minds think alike.
Is that the same one that I have on?
No,
it's a little different.
Yeah, these are Vivos.
Yeah, okay.
But same
concept.
Yeah. And, you know, because we're feet guys.
And we casually wear these around.
Casually.
That's a whole nother level.
Right.
Like level 1 is you wear them for training.
Right.
Level 2 is this is just your lifestyle.
This is who we are.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that.
I'm cool with it. You got to explain to a lot of people what you're wearing. I walk into the store, especially in the actual toe ones, and everybody's like, what the heck are those? Are you wearing socks?
Right.
And you got to describe it to everybody.
Yep. Good icebreaker. But anyways, the barefoot thing, you know, initially, I've always thought about it as what is the first interface with the athlete and the court or the field? And obviously it's your foot. So if we are asking our athletes to express high amounts of force from that interface, are we doing a disservice to our athletes by not training the foot? That was the number one concept that I grasped onto first. And it just made sense to me. Like the foot is a very complex piece of anatomy. Do not quote me on this, but something like 37 joints and 26 bones.
Yeah.
And, you know, if we aren't taking care of those areas of the body, then we're truly not unleashing true athleticism is where the thought came from. So then I started to educate myself and understand that the feet are obviously like the hands in terms of dexterity, and the amount of nerve endings in our feet and our hands are so high due to the fact that as bipedalers and thumb dominant creatures of the world, it was very important that whoever made us, God, if God is what you believe in, we needed to be able to have dexterity in both ends, feet and hands. So the stimulus that we receive from the floor drastically influences how we interact with the world around us, because shoes weren't always around, as everyone knows, through evolution. So it was very important for us to develop as humans, to survive, to catch prey, to have a very intimate relationship with our feet and the earth. Through the lifespan and development of a basketball player, that stimulus is completely abolished, because I'm sure you can attest to this as a player once before, being in AAU tournaments, playing 3-4 games a day. Did you ever take your shoes or socks off ever? Because you're going from one game to going to eat, back into the warm-up line. Boom, now I'm just chilling. Don't feel like taking my shoes off because I'm tired.
Right.
We lose that intimate relationship with the floor, our feet, and the communication from foot to brain, brain to foot. So reintroducing that communication feedback loop, I feel like, is a huge component of proprioception.
Mm-hmm.
And proprioception is just awareness with space and where our body is in space and that type of thing. And I'm sure everyone knows what that is.
Yep.
So that kind of unpeeled the onion even more. I like to put athletes without shoes and socks on different textures, whether it's rubber floor, whether it's tennis court, whether it's, you've heard of Nabosu?
No.
Emily Spleckel.
Oh, I have seen. Yep.
Amazing.
Yep.
She is awesome and off the chain. She has developed a product where it's essentially a yoga mat, but there's a rigid texture to it.
Yeah.
It almost feels very uncomfortable to those really basketball players who hate being barefoot.
Mm-hmm.
And it, again, reintroduces that feedback communication loop. And I love doing body weight stuff on that, just to, again, get the athletes out of their socks and shoes and reintroducing that communication.
Yep.
So I guess it all depends on how many years you've been working out with me. If you're brand new, we'll just warm up barefoot. You know what I mean? Build that robustness of being barefoot and being comfortable being barefoot into the training. And then Jrue, if we're talking about Jrue, who's been with me for 7, 8, 9 years, you know, sometimes we won't put our shoes on because he holds the robustness of being barefoot with high loads. We've drastically improved his ability to be single leg with, I don't know, 185 pounds on his back and do a single leg squat because he has that integrity.
Right.
And that was built over time. That doesn't, Rome wasn't built in a day. And then lastly, introducing velocity to the foot, where you're doing barefoot sprinting, where you're doing barefoot agility, with in mind that being able to cut hard on a barefoot on most surfaces isn't going to be possible because you'll slip. But it does take an integrity and robustness to be able to handle those forces. Otherwise, you're going to have foot issues.
Yep.
Plain and simple. The foot isn't able, the tissue around the foot, the joints, whatever, isn't able to absorb those forces well. But that, again, is built through proper phasing, proper programming, and it can be done to the point to where I've had Jrue sprint 20, 30 yards barefoot and nothing, he's able to do that. And I feel like there's a lot to be said about feeling those velocities and forces barefoot, feeling things in between your toes. You just know where you're at in space. It just feels great.
Right. 100%. That reminds me of a quote. I forgot who originally said this quote, but this is the example I always use, is playing or constantly being in thick-soled shoes and thick socks is similar to typing with gardening gloves on. You would have no idea where your fingers are in space. You would have no idea how much force to apply, in those gardening gloves. And that's exactly how our feet feel. And then all the way up the chain, we need that feedback to adjust. So if you have a problem with valgus knees,
Correct.
Well, do your feet know where they are? And so do you have that tripod foot? Or are you completely overpronated at all times? And your feet may have no idea because they don't get that feedback from the floor. A lot of people say they're all about the foot strength. And it's like, that's a portion of it.
Sure.
But just as important is that proprioception aspect.
Correct. And I just want to add to that, when we teach movement and trying to be a better mover on the court, I get guys out of their shoes and socks to break down where the contact should be when you cut, where the contact on the foot, right? And you can't feel that if you have shoes on.
No.
So we talk about inside edge a lot, moving laterally. I can explain it to you until I'm blue in the face, inside edge. But if I take your shoes off your feet, and you can actually feel the floor where the inside edge is, now, boom.
Yeah. You
have this epiphany of like, oh my gosh, I feel way quicker coming out of that cut.
Right. You have to feel it. Some things that just can't be described. No. You got to feel it. And I think people get excited. They hear conversations like this and they're like, okay, everything's barefoot from now on. As you said, that's an important point. Rome wasn't built in a day, and people's feet are so messed up that when they do get out of the shoes and they get away from that fake sense of stability that the shoes provide, they end up getting injured. And so you see stuff like plantar fasciitis, Achilles tendinopathy, because they went barefoot too early. The other thing people have to keep in mind is the surface really matters. So what we're talking about is, sprinting or doing some low-level jumping on grass or a soft turf.
Yes.
We all talk about, hey, humans are meant to be barefoot, but humans also aren't meant to be on concrete.
Correct.
Right? They were walking on dirt and grass, and so their feet could accept those forces. So I think periodizing in your surfaces matters, starting with the softest surface and then gradually moving towards the harder surfaces. And then, like you said, start with just a warm-up, a barefoot warm-up, or barefoot single leg balance drills, and then gradually bring it into more of your training. But you do have to be very, very patient with that.
Very careful.
All right, I got to go to the Instagram questions. We got the speed round.
Yay.
So let's see if we got any good ones here.
Me.
This one's interesting. Weirdest activities that actually help with athleticism. Trampoline would have fit in there.
Yes.
So we talked about that. Any other weird activities? I'm trying to think if I have any weird activities.
It's becoming more and more prevalent, but anytime you do the flow stuff, animal flow, Move Nat is another organization that does stuff. Like people kind of, what is that? Like they kind of, raise their eyebrows towards mainly players. Like coaches are up on game. Like they know exactly what this is.
Yep.
Especially do you remember when Jordan Reed was doing that on the sideline, the tight end for the Redskins?
No.
He was doing animal flow on the sideline and the camera caught him.
Really?
So obviously that was great marketing for them, but it was really cool to see an NFL tight end doing animal flow on the sidelines of a game.
Right.
So I feel like it is getting bigger, but obviously with basketball players who don't like to be barefoot, who don't like to put their hands on the floor, who don't like to be on the floor, period, that's going to be something that's a little weird. I love the pool.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's weird per se. I just feel like it's not traditional. People aren't doing it.
Right.
But, taking kettlebells in the pool, taking Vipers in the pool. And
the Vipers, that's a weird one that I like. I've been doing that a little bit. I've been taking the water bags in there and the Vipers. I saw you also posted one of Jrue in there. I like that a lot. It resists the body in ways that you just can't replicate anywhere else.
Absolutely.
And then like what we were talking about with the strengthening and end range, there's a lot of areas that we can't get to in end range in the weight room and safely train, but in the pool we can. I'll get them back to shoulders in a very stretched position and do rapid arm circles, that kind of stuff, through a full sprinter cycle where you're challenging the hamstrings at end range. So there's definitely some different stuff that the pool can provide that you can't get anywhere else.
Real quick, you mentioned your pool's like 6 feet, but have you ever got one of your NBA guys or anybody really, level doesn't matter, and had them tread water?
Oh yeah, just like
you can really separate, who grew up. You can separate just environmental upbringing, like who grew up in a pool, and who was around lakes and large bodies of water, and like who are completely pool illiterate, like they have no idea how to keep them to survive, literally. And not to digress, but we had an athlete come 2 summers ago, and a part of the active recovery was treading water, and literally day 1 he couldn't do 2 seconds, but end of the summer he was doing 20 seconds. So that was kind of cool to see.
There's some interesting qualities when you look at that, relaxation qualities. You got to be able to contract and then relax in a pool. The guys who get in there and freak out and just go they just sink to the bottom
and waste so much energy.
So much energy. And then this one's pretty good. When is a good time to incorporate trampoline, pool, and sand into workouts? So we actually talked about 2 of these already, trampoline and pool. We have not talked about sand. Let's talk about sand.
This person follows both of us closely.
I know. They know the exact questions.
Oh, my gosh.
Right?
Good job. Great question. I love the sand early because of the huge muscular load. You can get guys in a lactic bath fast in the sand. And there's no joint impact issues, as we know. You can jump guys in the sand, and the forgiving surface obviously protects you from those hard forces on the joints. So early in the programming is where I really like to involve the sand, but then also I'll sprinkle it in as like an active recovery day, again to do force stratification, just trying to limit high forces but still get a nice metabolic load or flush, if you will. But I see sometimes, and I'm not disagreeing, I'm just wondering why people put this like towards the end of their training, just as they're about to leave, and they're doing like high speed stuff in the sand.
Yeah.
And I just don't know why. I would just love to know why people live and die by the sand, because
I'm with you on that.
you're not getting real life anything when it comes to transfer to the court. I just want to know why. Like, why are you guys doing that late in the off season? But
right.
that's just
Unless it's strictly for the vibes. If you want to get your athletes to the beach, it's like, hey, here's water. We're in Southern California. Let's have fun for a day a week. I get that.
Absolutely.
No, I'm right there with you. Like, as a conditioning early off season, especially as a conditioning tool, it makes sense. Not much eccentric forces,
Correct.
so limits soreness. So we can do more total work, get less sore. Like you said, lactic bath. I like that term, by the way. I'm gonna take that one. Lactic bath.
But I must say it wasn't my term. So.
Yeah, the one thing that I stay away, I don't do too much speed stuff in the sand in general. My thing is this: when you really look at angles, if you look at acceleration angles where we're getting that steep, like 45 degree, or deceleration where it's the opposite, we're getting those negative shin angles.
Sure.
In sand, if you actually get to those steep angles, you slip. And so athletes self-organize and they start doing everything upright so that you don't slip in the sand. And so I think if anything, if you're doing too much of it, it's reinforcing bad patterns.
Correct.
Now, if you touch on it here and there, maybe it's not enough of a stimulus to create that negative adaptation. But my thing is just like, why? You know, so for me, I moved away from all like hard cuts, agility.
Right.
If I'm going to do some, I guess you could call it agility or change of direction, it would be like, you know, some high knees, because teaching in sand, you got to get your knees up. You got to get your feet up. So hurdles, high knees, that kind of stuff, jumping, like you said, you know, some low level bounding where you're getting some unstable surfaces. And so you're training the ankles and the feet.
Yes.
So for me, it's knowing the pros and cons of sand. And when you really know the pros and cons, what is good for, what is bad for, then you can really start to implement it at the right times and actually use the right drills.
I just think that everything has a cost. Like there's nothing that's amazing that doesn't have a cost.
There's no free lunch.
No free lunch. So understanding what that cost is number one, especially when you're dealing with $1 million athletes. This is something that I'll never understand when you tell me this is how you get more explosive. Go to the beach. Okay. Sounds good.
Right. And then you're also messing with the muscle tendon interaction. There's no tendons involved. As soon as you're in the sand, and that's one of the reasons why it's so hard and you get that lactic bath, is because it's so muscular driven. And so when you turn off the tendons and everything is muscular driven, don't you think if you get enough of that stimulus, they're going to take those same patterns to the court and start dipping deep, trying to load deep into the knee instead of being springy? So yeah, 100% agree with you there. Next one, do you use yourself as a guinea pig for your athletes' training? So are you out there trying everything before you implement it?
You guys can't see, but I'm taped up right now. and you know, I was the last one to admit and pull the age card. I'm 35 years old, but I'm still trying to live like I'm 21. The answer is yes. And I think that true coaches, true performance coaches know that demonstration is one of the most powerful teaching tools. It's an instant respect getter. And then it's an instant way to earn compliance, because it's like, oh my gosh, this dude can do that. All right, I got it. So if you're able to demonstrate and give examples of what you expect out of your athletes, you are fortifying that relationship of trust, I feel. So for me, I think that when your athlete surpasses you, it's a very humbling moment. Jrue Holiday. And, you know, it makes you feel more motivated to continue to work at it. But at the end of the day, just providing quality movement examples is what we're looking for. And this year, I am starting to understand that, you know, the body will program design for you, whether you like it or not. And right now I'm learning that the hard way. So I gotta slow down a little bit and understand why we're here. But I think it serves a huge purpose in being able to do what you're asking from your athletes.
For sure. Demonstration is everything. And then these guys are so visual more and more every year, the athletes that we're getting are more and more visual. And so if you describe it perfect, but your demo is shitty, their exercise is going to be shitty. Like it's, you cannot separate the two. So your demos have to be on point.
Yeah. I want to add, that's why you're super effective and game changing, is because not only do you do the performance stuff at a high level yourself, but you got a bag too.
I appreciate it.
And you demonstrate that, you know, it's all over social media. And I'm just like, that's what I don't have. I didn't play basketball. So to watch you do everything that you talk about on and off the court is like, I don't even know anyone who can do that. So you are that. One of one, bro. Like,
appreciate that. I don't know how long I'll be able to keep it up. So I got to use that while I can. But eventually, 15 years, I'm just going to be showing videos of what I used to do.
There it is.
Yeah, that's super important. But yeah, for me, it's like using myself as the guinea pig. We come up with all these ideas. I'm sure you're just like me, where you're laying in bed and it's like, boom, new idea. And it's like, you got to go try it out, because the problem is, people take those ideas and they just try it out on their $200 million athlete right away. And for me, there's this process of like, I got to try it out on myself, and I got to sit with this idea for a while. Because there's some ideas that you have that it makes so much sense in theory, but when you actually go do it, you're limping away and you're like, that's not the one. And so for me, it's like, try it out on myself. If I have some interns, if I have some people around that can also try it out, you know, take it up the ladder before it reaches the $200 million athlete.
Very important.
So yeah, I think that's huge.
Yeah.
Okay, last one. I don't know if this is good enough for the last one. We'll
talk to me nice.
We'll throw it out there. Your guys' take on elevation training masks. You see them in the commercials. You see them used on social media. And we're not talking about the actual elevation mask with the real machine and everything. We're talking about the straight mask that you can go buy for $100 or whatever.
Sure. So claims by the company is that it simulates high altitude training. This I do not agree with, because you need to be in altitude to simulate high altitude training, unless you have a machine or you're in a room. They have the high altitude rooms, which are really cool in itself. However, I'm not saying that they're not beneficial, because you can get some benefit with the right application. And essentially, how I describe it to people, I don't necessarily use them in my practice or use them on myself, but I don't think it's a bad tool. And the reason being is it does have an effect on the breathing accessory muscles.
Yeah.
It does create an adaptation, a positive adaptation on your intercostals and your ability to expand your rib cage more effectively upon inhalation. So, and then there's some diaphragmatic breathing stuff that you can do, loading diaphragmatic breathing that you can do as well, that can definitely transfer over into essentially just your respiratory system being more effective per breath taken. That all being said, is the benefit worth going through that suffering? Is the ultimate question. I've never used them to the point to where, man, I put my athlete through 6 weeks of using the training mask for 10 minutes a day, and I've seen their respiration rate drop this many breaths in 1 minute. Never done that, so I can't really speak to that. However, I have read papers on the fact that it does improve the ability to create more effective breaths. So I don't agree with them, or I don't necessarily disagree with them. I think that if you use them with the right application, I think they are very effective. However, I see people lifting heavy with them on. I see people doing sprints with them on. And it kind of is counterintuitive to me, because when you're doing PCR, high explosive power work, you want oxygen in to recover the ATP and the creatine phosphate system. So why would we want to limit that? However, if you're warming up with them, if you're doing your warm up with them, if you're creating maybe like an environment that exudes 140 to 160 beats per minute heart rate wise, that intensity, and your goal isn't pure expression of power, that may make sense to me. And I'd be willing to be like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. So, you know.
No, I'm right there with you. I think the way that people use it, like you're talking about sprints and doing it lifting, you're probably ruining that exercise because you're making that the limiting factor of the entire exercise.
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, if you want to do some breathing drills, I have seen the papers on basically, I don't know I guess hypertrophy of the lungs itself. But yeah, I mean, I think if you understand just like everything, if you understand the pros and cons, you know where to implement it.
That's it.
I haven't done a lot of it. I do wonder, can you get the same benefits from just breathing through a straw? Like, can I put 2 straws in my mouth and then clamp down on those straws and just breathe? Because that's limiting the amount of air I can get in and out. Yeah. I don't know.
I mean, in theory, yes. The answer is yes.
Right. Right. So I guess that would be a cheap way to go about doing it. Next one. This will be our last one. As far as recovery methods, day to day, are there things that you're using, you know, with your guys that you think are absolutely essential? Are there things that it's like we do it just because they like it? Or is it just like, hey, you know, sleep and nutrition and relaxation, and outside of that, nothing matters?
The easiest way to answer this question is whatever they comply to.
Yeah.
Because when you have the demographic that I'm working with, mainly NBA guys, it's really what they're cool with doing, what they agree to do. Because, you know, as a performance coach, and you can probably agree with this, is you want to be able to give them everything that they need to do at what time, and you know, you should be eating these types of foods, and before, after, during, you know, make sure you get this much sleep and this, that, and the third. And it's just like, not realistic. No. Not gonna happen. And I learned that over time. It's like, oh, you don't want to be great. You don't want to get 8 hours of sleep. That's not gonna work too well for you. Yeah. You got to work with people and, you know, treat people like people. Mm-hmm. So you just start to develop a relationship and communicate and figure out exactly what they're cool with and what they're going to, you know, buy into. Mm-hmm. So the main rock, and I feel like this is definitely common knowledge, is sleep. Mm-hmm. So if we can create some education to where they understand how important sleep is, that's going to be the number one force driver that I want in terms of recovery. Get your sleep, and not just quantity, but quality. Oh, What does that mean? Sleep environment, sleep hygiene, sleep routine. Mm-hmm. Do you understand that? Do you understand how important that is? Yeah, you slept at 8 hours, but if I put a sleep tracker on you, how much of that was REM and how much was deep? And if you want to break it down, all the hormone responses that we're looking for adaptation happens in deep sleep. So are you even able to get into deep sleep? Creating that education and that communication of that dialogue is super important. And if that's all that I can get to, I'm okay with that. Oh, you want more? Let's talk about diet. Let's talk about nutrition. Let's talk about sugar. Let's talk about polyunsaturated fats and vegetable oils. Let's talk about these types of things. Oh, it's getting a little bit too much. Okay, then stop eating right before you go to sleep, type thing, so that your body is focused on recovery and not digestion. Mm-hmm. So I think the culture defines what is acceptable, meaning Normatec boots are definitely a part of the culture. Mm-hmm. I think everybody's cool with doing Normatec because I can chill, play the game,
play video games,
or be on my phone.
Yep.
But some of the guys that you run into are like, give me what you got. Yeah. And those are like, you know, your dream clients, right? Yeah. And then a lot of the guys are just like, I don't want to really hear that right now. So you kind of pick and choose your battles.
Yep.
Answering the question, all in all, sleep. Like let's really just make sure that we're getting the necessary and quality sleep that can truly contribute to adaptation.
Right. Yeah, my thing is, don't ask me about cryotherapy and recovery boots if you're getting 6 hours of sleep.
Facts. Because
you want to go waste an hour on doing these other recovery methods when you're missing the big rock.
Yep.
Go take a nap. Like, that's what we'll do with this hour. Now, if you're getting your 8 to 10 hours of sleep, now you want to have the conversation about additional recovery methods. Sure. Great. Let's have that conversation. And then, as you know, when you really dive into the science, none of us know what really creates the change because there's such a gap in perceived benefits versus actual physiological change when it comes to, ice and cryotherapy
Sure.
and compression, Normatec, all that stuff. So at the end of the day, like if there's perceived benefits and they feel like it works, we'll do it. And if they hate it, like a lot of our guys hate the ice bath or they don't like the contrast stuff that I like to do, I'm not going to force you to do it.
Right.
I think that's a big misconception is that the athletes that we're working with, that we have all the time in the world and we have, you know, everything can be perfect. Even at this level, you know, things are still like you got to give and take a little bit. So I think that's a big misconception is that like, yeah, high school athletes are busy and college athletes, but once you're to the pros, it's all about just training. They got business events, they have family, like they have lives outside of their sport.
Absolutely.
And so we do have to compromise here and there where we have this idea of doing this recovery, but it doesn't make sense. They don't have the time. And so, yeah, there's definitely some compromise there. So again, going back to just get your big rocks, sleep, eat the right way, relax and be happy.
That's it.
Happy people recover.
Happy people.
And
I'm still in that one.
Happy people recover. And that's why I had an NBA guy in the Normatec the other day, and he was asking me like, you know, what are the benefits? And I'm like, honestly, look around you. Look at these palm trees. That's the benefits. That's a trick. I'm getting you to lay down for 20 minutes and look at some palm trees. The color green has actually been shown to improve recovery because you go out, you go to a park and you walk and you see the color green and you become happier. Being one with nature, that kind of stuff, like that all actually has that can move the needle a little bit. So that's kind of like why I do a lot of stuff in the yard now is like there's trees, there's grass, you know, go walk on the grass barefoot. That's recovery over like your typical cryotherapy.
Yeah.
Yep.
Short story, very applicable. Yesterday this happened. My wife and I were home around 3 and I'm just not feeling like my jolly, happy-go-lucky self. And she obviously she knows, like she feels it, and she's like, what can we do? What is wrong with you? And I'm just like, it's not you, it's not anything. I'm just bored. Like and I'm just like, I just need to be outside.
Yeah.
So sure enough, we link up with her brother and do this like mini hike, which ended at like this super cool outdoor track where there were, you know, a good amount of people exercising. And that in itself took me from where I was at to my normal happy-go-lucky self. And I just truly believe just being outside, seeing the green and being around people that I love shifted my whole outlook on life. You know what I mean? And I just think that people don't really, truly appreciate how simple that is and how effective that is. So just get outside, people.
Completely changes that aspect of the nervous system. You know, you scrolling through your phone all day and reading tweets is not going to get you to that parasympathetic relax and recover like going for a walk would. Yep. So my man. So that was some great insight. Really appreciate you being here. We're definitely going to have to do a round 2. Please. I think that our followers definitely gained a lot of knowledge today. So I really appreciate it, my man.
Yo, shout out to all the squids.
Squid
Squad.
You're the only guest that we've had that knew the term squid.
Squid Squad.
Squid Squad.
And then also thank you, my man. I really appreciate all that you bring to the field. There's not too many people like you. Keep fighting a good fight, and I really am blessed to be here with you. So thank you.
I appreciate it. All right, my squids, thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as I did. Make sure you check out my guy Mike G on Instagram at Mr. Do It Moving. If you're ready to sign up for EdgeU, check out edgeu.com. We're getting coaches to the next level. Whether you're a future coach, a high school kid, a college kid who's trying to become a trainer, or you're already at the highest level in the industry, we have NBA, MLB, NFL, NHL, head coaches, and sports scientists. It's become a go-to source of information for a lot of high-level coaches, and you could be next. If you want to sign up for our training programs, check out pjfperformance.net. We got our vert code bodyweight. We got our vert code elite. We got our ball handling programs. I also got some good stuff coming out for you guys that I'm not going to tell you about yet, but be on the lookout because it is going to be dropping soon. Also, we do have upper echelon whey isolate protein officially released. You could go to ue.com nutrition.com, or just type in Upper Echelon Nutrition. You can use discount code PJF Performance and get 20% off of your first order. So go check it out. We would appreciate the support. This is not a product that I am just endorsing. I was also involved in the creation of the product because I always wanted a very simple, straightforward, clean nutrient profile, third-party tested, so that I could really trust it, giving it to my NBA players and even giving it to our youth athletes as well. I wanted to make sure that there's no harmful additives and a bunch of artificial stuff in it that you got to go do research on. There's literally 4 ingredients and it's all natural. So go check that out and let me know how you like it.